I'm very lonely now.
The architectural magazine, if you like, was in the 20th century. It was architects' favourite medium. They used the magazine to promote their ideas, and they used the magazine to refer to and to test ideas and to also try and establish what architecture should be. The physicality of the magazine is a reference point. It's a common ground where architects go to look at what other people are doing, but also to be published in a magazine is a great validation of what your architecture is or should be, a validation that you've kind of made it in a way in architecture. My exhibition is called Playgrounds and Battlegrounds, and it's all about the architectural magazine as a common ground for architects, as a reference point for both inspiration and for direction. So the idea of playgrounds is it's where architects test their ideas and try new proposals and see how they go down. And the idea of battlegrounds is that it's a battleground for contesting and validating architecture and everybody having a say as to what they think architecture should and could be. So the architectural magazine is kind of a repository or a vehicle for architectural knowledge. I've selected a couple of decades from the 1950s to the 1970s of Architectural Review, Architectural Design, Casabella and Domus magazines, and I've selected a number of these, about 100 of each magazine, that shows how these magazines use the ideas of playgrounds and battlegrounds. And then the final aspect of the room is a diagram where I explain the networks of relationships of people who contribute to these magazines, to these 4 magazines. And they're actually, in a way, constructing architectural culture, these key people. Not only architects, but also the critics and the patrons and other important people who manufacture architectural culture. And they kind of center and gravitate around these 4 magazines. Usually we're used to using an architectural magazine weekly or monthly, and then we dispose of it or we file it or we pass it on. But the idea is that they're bound together as a very large book and that they have an actual agenda, or they have a campaign that they're trying to get across. So for example, with the idea of the Architectural Review, they had the Townscape campaign, which lasted from 1940s through to the mid-1970s. And so I've selected a number of magazines that explain this idea of townscape and what they were trying to do, combine modern architectural ideas with historical ideas, the idea of picturesque. And the same with Casabella, with Ernesto Nathan Rogers' idea of Casabella Continuità, where he tried to combine modern architecture with historicism and tried to create a new ideology of what continuità should mean. And this is very embodied in his magazine from 1953 to 1964. Domus was very much linked with Gioponti from 1928 when he founded the magazine all the way through to 1979 when he died. And he used it as a vehicle to promote his ideas of taste and modern taste to the middle classes. And this idea of using magazines as a campaign a platform, if you like, doesn't really exist anymore. The magazines are more commercially run, they're more slick, they're kind of better produced, but by a much smaller team nowadays. And it's a different kind of world that we live in with the magazines today than they used to be. And they didn't used to put so many buildings on the front of their magazines in those days. They used to commission artists or produced covers just for the magazines themselves. And so there's a lot more colourful and abstract representations of buildings and architects and artwork that goes on the covers in the old days than there is now, when it tends to be more photography. Two great things about looking in old architecture magazines. One is that sometimes you can't believe the things that they wrote and that they believed. You just cannot believe that they could possibly think that, because it's so different to what we believe today. Another aspect is you can't believe that they were writing exactly the same things as we write about and talk about today. For example, the ecological crisis. And you want to ask them, why hasn't anything changed? You were talking about this 40 years ago and things still haven't changed. Because there's a kind of crisis in the press at the moment, in the printed press, a very well-known crisis that subscriptions are going down, advertising is going down due to the economic climate, and the threat of the digital media as well. But I'm trying to celebrate the printed press and let people actually remember how good it is to feel the magazine, the weight of the magazine, the smell of the magazine, and it's got a place in architectural culture as well as the digital media. So I'm trying to remind people of how good the printed press is as well.